Welcome to Conversations from the Alcove. The Conversations from the Alcove is a series that looks at playwriting, art, and the world and life, not necessarily in that order. And it's run by me. Hi, my name is Caridad Svich. I'm a playwright, and I'm also artistic director of the Alcove New Play Development Program at the Lucille Lortel Theater in New York City, where we work with writers nationally and internationally. Our guest today is Matthew Libby. But before I introduce him to you, let me do a brief audio description of myself. So I am a fair-skinned person with brownish hair, brownish goldish hair. Today I'm wearing it down. This is, I think, maybe the first time on this entire series that I've worn my hair down. This is quite an accomplishment. So anyways, I'm wearing my hair down. It's sort of shoulder length, a little bit longer than shoulder length. I have bangs. I have brown eyes. I'm wearing my favorite tortoiseshell squarish glasses perched on the edge of my nose, and my red lipstick, which I love too. I'm also wearing stringy white headphones, and I'm wearing a shirt that has a black background. Is it black? Yes, it is. Black background with is it puppy dogs? I think it's puppy dogs on my shirt today. I wanted to wear something fun and festive. And when the world's falling apart, wear fun things. And also behind me, there is an outline of a wall and the outline of a curtain. Both of them are blurred out, but they're real. They're not virtual. And once again, now our guest today is Matthew Libby. He's a writer and actor based in Brooklyn by way of LA, La La Land. His plays include Data, which is at the Lortel stage soon when you see this. It was at Arena stage, where it was in Washington, D.C., where it was nominated for Best New Play for the Helen Hayes Awards. It was also a national, is it Candida? Is it Candida?
Yeah.
I always get mixed up with that one. Candida National Graduate Playwriting Award. We could talk more about that, the trajectory of the play later. There's also a play called Sisters at Northern Stage, which won did it win the Neukom Award?
Yeah.
Yay, fabulous. It won the Neukom Award. Data was previously adapted as a digital production by Alliance Theatre in May 2021, directed by Susan Booth. Matt is a very lauded playwright already, a Dramatist Guild Foundation Fellow, Theatre Masters Visionary Playwright, Princess Grace Award finalist, finalist for the O'Neill, many other things, writes also for television, and something I love to talk about later. They studied cognitive science and creative writing at Stanford. Ooh, I don't know a lot of playwrights that have that as a double major. And then he's received his MFA in dramatic writing from NYU Tisch. Welcome, Matthew.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, for those that know the series, I always start with the same question, but I've also added a new question to that list. But I'll start with the one we always start with first before I go on to the next one, which is, how is the climate crisis affecting your art practice?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're not going to have to wait long for me to talk about cognitive science. I think if one of the things I've always been really fascinated with as a theater artist is, I think theater is uniquely good at. I'm fascinated with this concept of cognitive dissonance, of the kind of humans' unique ability to hold contradictory truths in our head at one time, and to have to get through a day and figure out ways to resolve those contradictions and resolve that dissonance. Yeah. And I say that to say that, like, it feels like that's going to be a something we're going to need to get very good at over the next coming epoch. If anything, I feel it too, of just the truth of we're heading down a very bad path, and the truth of, like, you need to get through the day and have hope and continue on. And I think everyone, like, this is an age of cognitive dissonance, and everyone is in that cognitive dissonance, and we're all going to have to find some way to resolve it for ourselves, resolve it for the planet, resolve it for each other. And so I don't know. I think a lot of my plays are about that idea of cognitive dissonance. And I think theater is, like, uniquely good at making people sit in cognitive dissonance and sit in tension and sit in complication. And if the plays I write, like, do anything but, like, help people learn how to sit with tension and learn how to resolve tension, move forward through tension. Like that's the goal. It's something that I try to teach myself as I write. So hopefully it comes across in the plays.
Yeah. So I'm going to segue into, before I segue into the next question, I wanted to sort of expand on this a little bit. When you face the page, however you face it, let's say you're starting a new play, does it change? Does thinking about it, I always say to people, we're all writing climate crisis plays because we're living in a climate crisis. And so I think sometimes people say, oh, well, it has to be about that. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, no, but I think you just have to acknowledge, if you're writing something that's vaguely set now or in the near future, that's what you're writing, And so I think that then as playwrights, there's kind of an acknowledgement of that, I think, hopefully on some level. And I know that in terms of the TV industry, that's not as much true yet in theater, though I hope it will be. The film and TV industry has been doing a lot of kind of like, let's start kind of actually incorporating, mention of the world that we're living in, so that it kind of, so it doesn't feel like it's this kind of, in terms of the cognitive dissonance, it's like, let's start first of all, let's start acknowledging, right? Like, and let's start doing it in our storytelling, right? And so to that end, I wonder if when you face a blank page, does it affect how you think about either the means of production of what you're making or the form or structure of what you're writing?
Yeah, it more and more it is. It's interesting. A lot of the plays I've written in the past are or a lot of the plays that you mentioned in the plays of mine that have gotten any sort of attention have all been plays about tech. And the tech industry obviously has a very fraught relationship with environmentalism and with and with the climate crisis, but my experience of that world has always been one of by that world I mean the tech world has always been one of it's a bubble, and it's actually remarkable how much that world can segment itself away from the consequences of its actions. And so, it depends on the play. Like, this play, my play Data is such a sort of insular play. And it is such a, like, it all takes place within the walls of this tech company. And the whole kind of dramatic thrust of the play is that they're struggling to reconcile their actions with the effects it has on the world. And then my play Sisters takes place over 90 years, but the whole thing, starting kind of in the present future, but the whole thing is from the kind of POV of an AI. It's a lot more easier to explain in the context of the play, but it's the whole thing is about the limitation of our POV on it. And so it's interesting. I think what I'm responding to what you're saying is that it's always a choice, right? And I would hope that there is a sort of that the absence of that conversation is itself, in at least in what I'm writing, the absence of that conversation is itself some addition to it. That being said, I have started working on stuff that does address the climate crisis way more specifically, but yeah, I mean, I really my hope is that, like, if a play of mine can show people something clearly and show both sides of something, and not to say that, like, it doesn't come down on any side, but I think my plays are a lot about the tension of being a human right now, even if they don't explicitly deal with the climate crisis. It's all heading there, and it's all teaching towards that end, I think.
Right, totally understood. So I'll go to my second question, which will be now kind of a set question that I'll keep asking writers. You're the first one that I asked this of, which is fun. Which is we're in a, quote, as people say, post-truth era, which feels more so every day, a little startling. So how do and I think how do you kind of reconcile that as a playwright, or as just a writer in general, like writing for an audience that is living in a kind of like, I'll choose my own truth. How do you reconcile that?
Man, a couple things. The first is that one of the reasons why I love theater and why I keep doing it is that there's no barrier, right? There's no screen. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, because as you mentioned, I do film and TV work,
Right.
and look, I've been part of, we can get into my academic background, but I've been studying AI for like a decade. Like I've been on this train for a long time. I think I have a relatively nuanced perspective on it in the way it's going to impact us. But one of the things I'm deeply worried about is AI art and AI content and AI slop. And I've been having this thought recently where I'm like, well, they can't come for theater, like how could it possibly come for theater? And I wonder if as time goes on, if people will in the way that a certain generation is rediscovering analog cameras, like point and click cameras, and wanting this sort of tactile nature of it. I do wonder if people are going to turn to theater for that. I think that's one of the things that theater, thinking about like what theater does that the other mediums can't do. It's like there's no distance, right? There's no barrier. There's no lie. What you put on stage is what the audience sees. And so then it's just like, I think it's our responsibility as playwrights to just be as absolutely truthful as possible, to be as completely, metaphorically naked up there on stage and not lie at all, and for me, like I one of the ways that it definitely has affected my practice is I've always been a pretty voracious researcher, but I know there's a thing, and a lot of playwrights say that like research is a form of procrastination. I think that's probably true, but I also like love it, and I love immersing myself in worlds and immersing myself in facts and immersing myself in the stories of a ecosystem, of a world. And if anything, especially in recent years, I've just been really hard. I've been harder on myself of just trying to make sure I'm not BSing anybody, to make sure both the literal facts of the play are true, and also that I'm being honest with myself for the things that are not factual. Like if I'm being honest with myself about, is the thing that I'm putting on stage, like, or putting on the page to put on stage, honest and real and truthful, right? So it's for me, I've turned the knob up on myself, like I've turned the dial up on myself of just like, how can I just be even more true,
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. What a great response, and thank you for sharing that. I wanted to move into data a little bit. What made you write it? I mean, we can surmise from the outside. The tech world is there. The tech bro world, specifically Silicon Valley, its impact on everything. Truly everything, and especially its intersection with our political world, which of course every single day we're seeing more and more of that, both nationally and internationally. That famous, is it famous? Yes, I guess it is. At this second inauguration of our current president, where suddenly there was Zuckerberg, and then there was, what I mean? And suddenly it was like the tech world people were actually at the inauguration, like pretty, and that was like, and a lot of people were like, ooh, and I was like, well, at least they're being very transparent about it. And so I wonder about like the genesis of the play, but also about, you're writing about a field, like literally technically, that is changing very rapidly. So how do you kind of like, how do you keep the play sort of current, but also true to what it needed to be when you first wrote it?
Yeah, I'll go back to the beginning. I wrote the first draft of this play in the fall of 2018. It's been kicking around for a long time. So I graduated from my undergrad program in 2017. As we've talked about, I was a cognitive science major of all things. I was, and I'll say this because it does relate to the play. Like I went into Stanford thinking I was going to be a psychology major, maybe creative writing. I was interested in getting the general education.
Okay.
There's a kind of culture thing at Stanford where if you're at Stanford, you take computer science. And I one time heard a stat that like 95% of the student population at Stanford at least tries the introductory computer science class. I know some people who took that class, and dropped it at drop ad. I know people who took that class and now work in tech, and I was kind of somewhere in the middle in that I've always liked math and science, and this is a class CS 106A. It's the introductory class at Stanford. It's like you code in Java and you code like little games, and I'd always really liked math and science, and I never really thought I was going to work in tech, but I especially liked how what I was studying in computer science classes related to my psychology classes, and so I started taking more and more computer science. Like, to be honest, like partially peer pressury, like, I don't know, partially just like trying to fit in with the vibe of that place. But also because I genuinely was finding myself getting interested in it. And there's kind of this point in the computer science curriculum there where you can either go really hard coding, like go really deep into the engineering side of things, or you can stay more on the theory side of things and go more down the math route. And I did the latter because, again, I was finding that the thing that was really interesting to me was just this idea of like the rules that govern what we think of as a computer are the same rules that govern how humans process information and humans think. And the further you get into computer science from a theoretical point of view, the more it is about theories of cognition and theories of information. And once I started going down that path, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm a cognitive science major. But at the same time, I had this really tricky relationship with the tech industry, and that I had to kind of make a decision at a certain point, which was like, you'd hear all these stories while you're a student there of like, and I should say like the computer science, like when you go to a career fair, like it's like 400 consulting firms, like 300 tech companies, and then one rinky-dink little arts table in the corner.
Right, I know.
And like computer science on top of that gets their own career fair, right? So it's you are being sort of inundated with like, this is not just a path you can take, it is like the only path you can take.
Right.
So the summer after my junior year, I was looking for an internship, and through a friend of mine, I got an internship, or I got an interview at a company called Palantir. This would have been the summer of 2016. It was pre the first Trump administration, and I was in for a technical writer internship at Palantir, and I got through to the final round. I went and did an on-site interview at Palantir. I did my like multiple interviews. They did a kind of product demo, and then a couple weeks later, I found out I didn't get the internship. Cut to I graduate. And I'm sitting, I moved back home to LA, and I'm living in my childhood home in LA, feeling this real sort of like directionless quarter life crisis. And I read an article that Palantir, the headline was literally like, Palantir, meet the company building Trump's immigration machine or deportation machine. Right. Yeah. And it was an article about Palantir. And Palantir essentially got really emboldened in the first Trump administration. They're getting very emboldened now also, but they're a data mining company. Right. Or they make software for data mining, and they have a lot of contracts with the government, and they have for years. And I kind of knew that when I went in, like I knew they did somewhat, more, I knew they worked with the government. It's in the play. Just this idea of like, I didn't really know, but I kind of knew. But this was also around the time that like, Cambridge Analytica was in the news, that Facebook scandal. It's around the time of you know, kids in cages. It was a really difficult, and just the sort of like intersection of those things was very prevalent in this would have been the spring of 2018. And I just had this realization where I was literally, you know, in this kind of directionless moment in my life, and I was sitting in my like dad's office in our house and just thinking to myself, like, well, I know people who work at Palantir. I know people who work at Facebook. I wonder if they're feeling the same sort of quarter-life crisis-y things that I'm feeling. And I wonder if the fact that they work at these companies that demand so much of their time and energy and loyalty and mental fortitude is changing anything about that, right? Is affecting that in any way. And so that's where I started coming up with the idea of the play. And it was the idea that I came into I started at NYU that fall. Mm-hmm. It was the story that I came into NYU knowing I was going to write. And it was my play at NYU, what was the opening drafts of it. And Athena, the company in the play, is essentially a very light Palantir stand-in. Mm-hmm. And so, but to get to the second part of your question, it's like, mm-hmm. That was 2018. That was 2018. and there's a, you know, I don't know how much we want to get into the sort of like, you know, spoilery stuff in the play or like reveals of the play, but I'll just say that there's a kind of big twist in the play, a kind of reveal in the play about what the nature of this company's work is. That when I started writing the play was like sci-fi, right? It was like soft sci-fi. Yeah. And now it is not.
No, it is not.
And a lot of what I've had to do over the past 7 years is every time I've come back to work on the play, I've had to sort of keep updating the details a little bit to keep it ahead of, because the goal with the play was always like, this is where we're heading kind of thing. And what I've done every single time I've had the opportunity to go back and work on the play in any sort of workshop setting has been looking at those details and just and trying to be really, again, just like honesty, like lay of the land, like what is actually happening right now? What do people think is happening right now? How is that different than what is happening right now? And where am I filling in the gap? Right. And then, so it's been a lot of that. It's been a lot of like the details. And one of the things that me and the director, Tyne Raffaelli, who's directing at the Lortel and who I've been working with for years, one thing that she's been really on top of me about for the years that we've been working on this together is, while I'm worried about that, she's really focused on the like, forget all of that. The play needs to be a play, even if it gets produced again in 15 years and it is out of date and you're not gonna be able to touch it anymore. Like a play needs to work as a play. And she's been really, really good about making sure that the sort of, you know, capital C classical drama of the play is holding water. And so that at this point, now that we're prepping for the Lortel, a lot of what I'm doing is like, now that sort of like core feels solid to us, now I can kind of go back into that cosmetic stuff and be like, well, look, like I'm not going to be able to keep updating the play forever. The play is sort of fixated in this moment in time right now. And a lot of it is just like, again, the things I was saying, like, what is actually the lay of the land right now? What am I describing in the play? How is that different than the lay of the land? And again, how can I try to fudge those details to project forward a little bit to like, well, you know, what might be next? And so yeah, it's frustrating. It's been frustrating. Not gonna lie. It's like the theater industry obviously moves significantly slower than the tech industry.
Yes,
but I do think the idea of like let the moral conundrum of the play, which is what the play is really about, is the characters and their moral conundrums. Let that be solid, and then all of the details around it will fall into place.
Yeah, yes. Thanks for articulating all that. And, you know, it's a workplace drama. So I sort of want to highlight that as well, that you're writing about not only the broader culture of the tech bro industry, but also literally about people at a workplace, which, you know, I want to highlight that because I read a lot of plays and I see a lot of plays and all those things, but I don't see a lot of people writing plays set in workplaces that much anymore. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, this is also functions as that, which I think is really it has its own delight. I will say, you know,
it's a first play Sorry, it's a first job play. You know,
Yeah.
it's a play about having to out of college and like trying to be yourself and find yourself within the workplace, right?
Yeah.
There's a great Adam Bach play called The Thugs that was a big Yeah. That's all about workplace dynamics. And I mean, it's that was the other thing about it is that it's really about young people. I don't know. One of the ways I describe it is like it's a play about having a quarter life crisis within an industry that is itself having a quarter life crisis. You know, that. And so there's a lot in the play before you get to the sort of like tech specifics of it, for sure. I wanted to sort of go back. I mean, you know, partly to see how did the play get to where it is now. So in terms of just from the business side of it, right? So it has the digital production in 2021 with the Alliance, and then, you know, I wonder when the producers got involved, when the Tyne was not originally part of that production. So when did Tyne get involved? And what's that process, that side of it? What's that been like in terms of shepherding it to, let's say, Arena Stage first, right? Because that was the premiere, you know? Yeah. Absolutely. I wrote the first draft in my Play One class at NYU. And and then I like kind of worked on it a little bit. You know, it was kicking around. I was working on other stuff, but I was, you know, it was one that I kept working on for sure, and I started submitting it to places. Right. In one of the places I submitted it to was the Candida, which is, for people who may not know, is a graduate playwriting competition specifically for graduate students, run by the Alliance Theater in Atlanta. And so I submitted to it. You know, not expecting anything, obviously, because all I was getting were rejections at that point. And then, you know, one day out of the blue, I get a call that, you know, the dramaturg wants to talk. And then a week later, I get a call that I won. And that was February 2020. And so I, you know, and like, I'm a pretty, you know, like, anxious, you know, like I have a kind of typical Jewish neuroses. And like, I distinctly remember, I always think about like how things can go wrong. And I distinctly remember getting that call and being like, well, so important detail, part of the prize is that the world premiere of the play, right? Like part of the prize is that the play goes up in their following season. And I distinctly remember getting that call and being like, well, what could possibly happen? You know, that would prevent this from happening. And I'll say that like the Alliance was amazing. Like they kept it on their season when they did not need to. And you know, Susan Booth, who was the artistic director of the Alliance at the time, was like a real champion of the play and really got what I was going for and saw what I was trying to do and really protected the play through the chaos of that year. And eventually it was around the time when theaters were starting to open up again, but like it was trickier for a regional theater, and it was tricky to kind of secure contracts when we needed to. So eventually towards the end of 2020, we pulled the trigger on scrapping the in-person production and doing a digital version, doing a virtual version of it. That was wild. I mean, I'm like really proud of what we created, but I had to stop thinking about it like a play at a certain point, because it was just so different. I mean, essentially what it ended up being was we rehearsed over Zoom for about a week or 2 weeks. Then all of the actors went to Atlanta. I never went to Atlanta this entire time. All the actors went to Atlanta. The Alliance rented out this conference room size studio at Georgia State University with 360 green screen. And they set up 4 cameras. Each actor had their own sort of filming pod. And they did the scenes live and in person, like 20 feet apart, pretending they were 3 feet apart. And then we had a month of post-production compositing them into the same frame and adding backgrounds. So we made a movie, basically, you know, like it was a movie. Like the kind of tools of theater stopped applying at a certain point. And I was able to do like a final kind of rewrite in the edit, you know, in the way that you do in TV. And I don't know if that would have worked for many plays. I think for this play, which is so much about the sort of like uncanny valley of this world and the sort of like artifice of it and the artificiality of the world that's hiding the sort of the bright, sunny Silicon Valley that's hiding the sort of like darker core underneath. Right. It worked really well, and like it streamed for like a month, 6 weeks, and I think everyone was happy. But they also, I know, felt a little, they wanted to make sure the play had a life, and they kind of sent the play out, and one of the people who responded was a commercial producer named Jeffrey Richards, who came on board the project a couple months after that Alliance version, and then we talked about directors, and Tyne was on both of our lists, and I met with Tyne, and we got along swimmingly, and we've been at it for like 4 years now. And so over those years, it was a lot. He through Jeffrey, we did about 2 or 3, one virtual, couple in person readings. Did a lot of work on the play, and once we felt like the play was in really good shape, from my perspective, I just got a call like one day in February of last year, being like, "Hey, are you free this fall to go to DC for a couple months?" But he had been doing all of his producing behind the scenes, and Hannah Sharif at Arena had really responded to the play, and they had a slot, and it just happened. I mean, Jeffrey's been the advocate for years now, and that's how we ended up at Arena. And again, it was like a very relatively quick turnaround in that it was we were in rehearsals about 6-7 months after I got the call that it was happening. And then Tyne wasn't available to do that production in DC, so Margot Bordelon, who's an amazing director and friend, and she stepped in to direct that, and for the Lortel, Tyne and I have been working again, and the play's changed since Arena. It's changing every day, for all the reasons I said before. But yeah, that's the version of the the
path. That's the path that it's taken. It's a pretty, it feels like a long path. I want to lift up something you said earlier about the theater industry being behind everything, which I think is true. It feels to be an industry that is, I'm going to quote somebody that I interviewed recently for this series that said, "The theater is in love with its past way too much." And I think that one of the problems with that is that it kind of clings to that as a form of protection, maybe, but actually stops it from moving forward. And if you look at other art forms, if you look at dance, or if you look at music, or if they're not going, the past was the best of us. You know what I mean? That's not the mentality, So it's a very strange industry that way. But also just in terms of the logistics of getting a play to happen, it's hard enough. It sometimes it takes years and years and years, right? So 5 years. Yeah, and then sometimes it's very quick. Like it's a very fickle industry that way, but it's also you have to put in the time. I wanted to sort of so you're studying cognitive science, and then you're like playwriting. So how did playwriting enter the picture? Were you always just a secret playwright, or what happened there?
Yeah, I've always known that this is what I wanted to do. But my way into dramatic writing is through screenwriting. I kind of took a weird, I'm just from LA, and the film industry is all around, and my neighbor was a screenwriter, and so I think I knew that screenwriting was a job earlier than most people, and so my way into a lot of this was movies and TV, and but I'd always loved theater, and I acted in a lot of theater, and I read a lot of plays. I started writing plays in high school. I was writing, but my way into it was I would try adapting movies I loved into plays. Like I did that with The Truman Show. I tried to adapt The Truman Show into a play, which was a wild idea that maybe I should revisit. I don't know. It's like, could be interesting. Yeah. But anyway, so I was getting this interest. And then when I was at Stanford, the short version of it is like, I knew I wanted to do this, but it was unclear to me whether or not I wanted to go to a conservatory, go to a BFA program, or do or get the quote unquote general education. Right. And I was fully planning on going to a BFA, to a conservatory, to a film and or theater school.
Right.
I got into Stanford, and the advice that I got from a mentor at the time was the only thing more important than knowing how to write is having stuff to write about. Right.
Uh-huh.
Explore your interests, explore your passions, and then write about that. Like grad
Yeah.
school will always be there for you, which turned out to be
Yeah.
the case for me.
Yeah.
And so I was at Stanford, like, thinking I was gonna, the theater program at Stanford is really renowned, but is very theory based and
It
very,
is.
yeah. And that was not super interesting to me at the time. I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to write. And so I was taking creative writing classes. I was writing one acts. I was kind of doing all this stuff extracurricularly while I was doing the sort of general education thing throughout my curriculum. And then the thing that kind of unlocked it all was I was always on the hunt for like excuses to write. Like that's one of the things about being an arts-minded person at a school that doesn't really support the arts is you have to get pretty entrepreneurial about it. You have to kind of fight for your opportunities. And I actually am really grateful for that looking back. But one of the things that I ended up finding was that there was this program there called Honors in the Arts, which was specifically for non-arts majors to do an arts thesis and get academic honors for it. But the thesis needed to be about your major. And so I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And I decided to apply for that. And I got it. And I was like, okay, well, I want to write a play. And so I was forced all of a sudden to think about, well, how is my cognitive science curriculum dramatic, right? How is it universal? How is it human? How is it get out of the theory of it? And one of the things that that made me realize was that a lot of what I was studying was really about this question of like what's innately human in a technological world, right? If part of what I'm studying is how you can kind of abstract human cognition into kind of math and computer form, then the kind of logical next question is, well, like, is there anything you couldn't abstract, right? Is there anything about the experience of being human that the algorithm can never touch, that you can't replicate, that can't be put into a machine? And I was like, okay, that's an interesting question. And I wrote this play called The Machine that was my senior thesis at Stanford that is also still kicking around. I have a reading in Westport in November 3rd. And that play is all about a poet with writer's block who is approached by a tech CEO for her help to build a computer that can write her poetry, that can create art. That's another wrote that play in 2017, and I've had to keep tinkering.
Yes, because now it's happening. Yes.
And so that one was my first stab really at like, okay, well, how is this stuff actually connected to what I'm doing? And so between those three plays, I feel like I've written my AI plays, and a lot of what I'm doing now is different, is not really tech based anymore, but hopefully it still sort of retains that same idea, because I think that's the thing that motivates a lot of my work is just like the experience of being a brain and a body, and and what makes me and you and what makes all of us one and the same. Like, what's the boundary between people? What's the boundary between us and the things we create? A lot of that's in my plays about tech, but I've been abstracting it. I've been taking it out of the realm. I feel like I've said all I need to say about AI for the moment.
And there's so much, and that world is also changing immensely. And so I think there'll be different questions that are going to be asked, I think, in the near future about it. I'm still fascinated because it's a relatively new phenomenon of there's the AI audience listening to the AI music.
Yeah.
the sort of false algorithm, really. But and so I'm just intrigued by that as a kind of like, that feels like an alternate reality, but that's being created in this reality. And we're sort of, the AI band that's got like a hit, you know what I mean? And but also like real musicians, real live musicians going, what the hell's happening? Where's my job? And also like who is listening to, I mean, a lot of it has to do with discernment too. Like I think about people listening to, say, an AI band or listening to that track or whatever, and then not distinguishing that from like I'm listening to like a real band. Do you know what I mean? And it gets me back to thinking about like human discernment of like, what am I really listening to? How am I listening to that? How do I know what the texture of that is true or not? And what do we call truth and all of that? I'm thinking about as you were describing your play, The Machine, I was thinking about, there's a colleague of mine that worked on a project called Signal to Noise, and great project. And the way they built that project, a company called Force Entertainment, and the lead creator on that is Tim Etchells, and they created an AI text. But I was watching the show, and the whole show is they're kind of like lip syncing this AI text, and I was like, oh, did AI write it? And he said, no, I wrote the text, and then I fed it into AI, and then what I did is I tried to hacked AI. I wanted to, because the text kept sort of generating something, and so in the AI version, and so he said I figured out a way to hack that so it couldn't do that, and I started to distort it, and so it's a distortion of his text mixed with what AI was trying to do with it, and him kind of like busting through that. It's a really fascinating piece about like what you think you're listening to, and what's real, and and a lot of it is about the ownership of narrative and so forth, and what does that mean. So it just made me think about that, and I think that's a rich area to think about in terms of theatricality, of like how we're kind of like interpreting. I mean, it goes back to sort of the question of truth and post-truth and all of that, but how do we interpret what we are receiving as humans, but also how we create that, transform that for ourselves. So I wonder if any of that speaks to you in any way.
Very much so. I mean, there's this thing in my play, The Machine, that's all about this idea of like, if I put a poem in front of you and you read that poem and you have an emotional reaction to that poem, and then I tell you it was written by AI, how does your emotional reaction change, right? And I would, especially like pre GPT, right? I would ask people this question, and they would immediately go like, "Well, no, then it was fake, right? Like whatever I felt was fake, right?" And I would like to believe that I'm that's true for me, that I have some sort, but like I don't know, and I mean like there's this thing. It raises this question of like, is art the right words in the right order? Right, or the right paint strokes in the right order, the right notes in the right order, or is there something deeper that we're connecting to? And I think that a lot of people will probably say the latter, right? But it's hard to define what that is. And I don't know if I know. Like a lot of what I'm like feel like I'm chasing as a writer on a day-to-day basis is this like very sort of amorphous thing that doesn't feel quantifiable, but maybe it is. And I was just at a bachelor party with some friends from Stanford, right? And a lot of whom now work in AI. And we did this. It was kind of a joke. I'll preface this by saying it was kind of a joke, but it was also kind of not. But they were doing this thing over the course of the weekend where when anything kind of notable was happening to us, one of the guys would go away and like 10 minutes later come back with a song, like an full AI song about thing, right? Like with the dinner, we would go to a dinner that was like, we went to like a 7-course tasting menu for the groom to be, and then by the time we got to the car, he plugged in his iPhone and was playing a song called 7 Courses Deep. Like it was that quick, right? And one of the things that it made me think about, and I was talking to some of the guys about this, but like they were describing it as like it's almost like a photo album of the trip, right? Like when you get back home, you'll play that song for your friends and you'll be able to key into the story of that trip through that song. And I found that really interesting because it's like I don't know how far and wide that particular work of art would go outside of this group of 7 people. But what you were just saying about kind of owning the narrative and what are we connecting to when we're connecting about art? I think the thing we're connecting to with that song beyond like, it's actually the tech is good enough at this point. The song's quite good. The thing that we're connecting to is the sort of the shared collective narrative of it. And so I don't know. I wonder if in the future that's going to be the use of it, is that it's not that once we discern from the slop if there will be a real need, like desire for that. Like I don't know. I don't know. But it was the first time seeing that, like being around that sort of feedback loop of event to art. It was very interesting to me. And again, like I don't want to frame it like these guys were like, this is it was kind of a joke, but it made me realize, you know what I mean? It was, I found it just very sort of like, it made me see it in a different way, which, you know, again, having been following this stuff for a long time, I found very notable.
Yeah. I mean, I think the dark side of a lot of this, and, you know, what some people have been saying is, people feeling I want to outsource my imagination to the machine, right? Do you know what I mean? Like this sort of that thing of like, I just don't want to think anymore. It's too hard. So let me have the machine think for me. and it's like, and you know, which people do say, right? And so, and somebody was positing a line yesterday, you know, what kind of world is that? Do you know what I mean? A world where people don't actually want to think, like they just want to let the machine do all my thinking for me. Let the machine pick out what I'm going to wear. Let the machine, you know what I mean? At a certain point, that abdication of will, thought, imagination, playfulness, creativity, and so forth, you're sort of robbing yourself of that willfully. I think that is a very troubling, but it's also a conundrum, but it's also, to put it mildly, but it's also part and parcel of burnout culture, and people feel like, oh, I'm working too hard, and so therefore, of course I'll give up. That's one thing that is part of being human, and so I think about how a lot of AI frames itself in terms of, if you look at the commercials and stuff, it's sort of very friendly. It's sort of like your AI assistant. You've always wanted a PA, right? You've always wanted a buddy. You've always wanted and so that kind of like culture of like the friendly part of that appeals to people, right? Like, because people are overworked and they're tired and they're sick and they're broke and all these things are happening, right? So I think that there's a kind of, oh yes, I'll have this buddy, I'll have my little chatbot friend, I'll have my, and it's sort of I understand the appeal of that, and I also think the dark side of that is that you're kind of giving yourself over, so I just wonder about that terrain of being in a world where people are willfully giving themselves over.
That's that is very scary to me, and I think part of the reason why it's scary to me is that. It's not spoiler, it's not alive, right? It is math, right?
Right.
The entire thing is math, right? The entire thing is unbelievably immensely complex statistical probability computations, right? Like you can, yes, sure, you can, like, I'm sure, some straw man computer science AI guy listening to this is going to be like, yeah, but isn't that like an emergent intelligence, blah blah. I'm like, I don't care. It's math, right? And it's math, and it's an algorithm that is proprietary to a company, right? And this is before you even get to like data privacy stuff. It is there. I think there are there's a real. These companies are in many ways banking on us not understanding the technology that we use, and that is not unique, right? Like that has been the case since they made you scroll past the terms and conditions and just click accept, right? Ever since then, the math has been, or like their logic has been like, they're not going to care, they're not going to want to, they're not going to want to understand this, and I think. The scary thing for me is that like we have an immense ability to anthropomorphize anything, right? Anything, and I think there is something very the scary thing is that that ability to anthropomorphize something that is not alive will lead to changing definitions of things that are alive. By which I mean, like right now in all over New York, there are those, like in like the West 4th subway station, there are those ads for like Friend, which is this AI. Have you seen these?
Yes.
Yes, AI pendant that like will like the tagline is like, I won't interrupt your binge, or like I won't,
Right.
I'll be there to talk to you. And like I was reading an article about this, but that put it in a way I thought was really nice, which is like it's claiming that is the ideal version of a friend, is some sort of like sycophantic, like flattering monstrosity, like completely ahuman, right? Like it's this weird. It's going back to cognitive dissonance, right? It's this weird thing of like you're both want this sort of idealized version of a human, but also something that is in no way acting like a human ever would, right? And I guess the part of the fear with those kind of connections is like the second you start treating that thing as if it's human, the real danger is that it then changes the way that you view. It changes the definition of what it means to be human, right? It changes the definition of what it means to be a friend, be a partner, be a therapist, any of these things. And which, look, like I have my certain opinion on that, but even if you don't want to like value judge it, like it is just something that people need to be aware of, right? Like it is just something that is happening unconsciously right now in a way that needs to be conscious. Like it just needs to be conscious for people. And I think the more that people learn to understand what this technology is, what it can do, what it can't do, I really think like knowledge is power in that way. And I don't know if people are interested in that. I don't know if people are interested in learning how these things work, or like what exactly it is they're putting their faith in, or if they're okay with it just being a mirror, and it being this that just reflects back at them. I don't know, and I honestly don't judge it, because for all the reasons you said, it's like we're not solving the root problems that cause the loneliness and cause proliferation of AI. So like, people do what they got to do. Cognitive dissonance. You do what you got to do to get through the day and not feel like crap. I do think I think that's the path that scares me, is just like people investing in something that does not love them, right? that is not real. And changing the way that the world operates.
Yeah, and expecting then the world to operate like, right? So and then like, what do you mean you're being human? That's not what humans do. Reminds me of two things before we wrap up, but I was thinking about speaking of sort of AI. So I was thinking about, I don't know if you've been on Claude's platform. I find it kind of fascinating because they actually show you how the mapping works. And so you key in something, for those who haven't, and it just starts showing you, but it does the whole computation next to you. And I'm like, oh, I kind of love that, because you sort of see what the machinery is, right? And I think that's, I sort of appreciate that, even, as a kind of visual representation. The other part of that I was thinking about, I'm sure you know about this, but Sheila Heti wrote a series of short stories with AI she called them her Alice stories, and so she named a chatbot Alice as an Alice in Wonderland, and had quote conversations with Alice, which I think is hysterical, because of course it's just a mirror. But I did have these conversations with Alice, and I wrote these stories with Alice, and I did this whole thing, and I think that this notion of like, let me anthropomorphize this machine, basically, machinery, and then start to think that they understand that it's artificial, but they start to think of it as real. And I find it, and I know that was a conceptual experiment on Heti's part, but I also feel like sometimes, as writers, sometimes you're like, I have a writing buddy. That's awesome. And so I think about like, how do you as a writer, irrespective of AI, but how do you kind of keep yourself centered, focused, clear-eyed? I think our job takes a lot of clarity.
Yeah.
in terms of what we do. I know people like plays, plays are fun, whatever, but actually you have to be laser focused in how to like make something. And also you have to be laser focused in like what your, I'm going to use the word delivery mechanism, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but you have to sort of understand how an audience will receive that, how the audience will kind of like perceive the world that you're crafting, because it is art, so it's about perception, right? So so how do you stay clear-eyed in this world?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be better at this, but I think what I'm trying to follow my, it's a very basic answer. I'm trying to follow my instincts more, by which I mean I'm trying to listen to my body more. I think I've always had a sort of I've always had this feeling, especially knowing so many people who have these 9-to-5s with very specific feedback loops of success, right? Like, I think I've always been very jealous of is the idea that you can get to the end of a day and know whether or not you had a good day.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for a lot of writers, like, you get to the end of the day and you're like, well, I don't know if that was anything. Like, I don't know if I did anything today, And so I've had to kind of define for me what I typically feel like I need to do to feel like I had a good day. Like how, and that's like, show up for the work for a certain amount of time. I love the Pomodoro method. I love doing, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. That helps me concentrate. I've gotten better at thinking about reading plays and seeing theater and watching movies and taking in art as work, right? Like, and I've learned that about myself, that like, that's something I need to feel like I had a good day. Getting out of the house, like that kind of thing makes me feel like I had a good day. And so I think, like, for me, it's a lot of like building those sort of, knowing that no one is going to have make the feedback loop for me. I feel the need to make it for myself. And it's one of the tricky things about having graduated during the pandemic is that the whole next step of then getting into a room with other people and collaborating and working on something together was something that was kind of withheld from me for a certain amount of time because of when I graduated. And it was something that I started learning as more stuff started happening in person, and stuff that, like, and it's something that I'm still learning. But just the idea of, like, when we, at a certain point, like, hopefully by that point, I know the work well enough to be able to really be honest with myself, again, going back to that, of just like, is this the thing that I want to see or not? And because I really feel like, as invested as I am in the sort of ride of a play, it's so hard to hear the voice inside of you. It's, again, no, I didn't intend this, but it's kind of what Data's about, is about like how difficult it is to listen to the voice inside of yourself when everybody's trying to define it outside of you.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that's why I wrote the play, is like, that's for me, it's a vision of how to be centered in a world of noise. It's just like trying desperately to listen to the voice inside of you of just like, what do I need to do today? What am I trying to do? What am I trying to make? And trying to organize my life in such a way that I'm able to achieve that.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Matthew. That's a great way to end our conversation today, which I hope is not the last of our conversations together. For those of you who have been following Conversations from the Alcove, thanks for being here. If this is your first time, there's a lot of back catalog of our work on YouTube, but also more to come. So join us for more chats about playwriting, theater, film, TV, books, movies, all the things, also art and life in the world. But if you have been to the series before, I say so long to you all first, and then stay offline with our guests a little bit later. But for now, thanks for visiting.